Hello and welcome to another edition of Truth and Rhythm, brought to you by funkandstuff.net. This is the interview show that gets deep into the pocket with contemporary music's foremost masters of the groove. I'm your host, Scott Dr. GX Goldfine, and as always, I thank you very much for watching to the video version at funkandstuff.net or on YouTube, or listening to the podcast audio version on Spotify, iTunes, Google, just about anywhere where you can get a podcast. I also want to give a shout out to the Funk Hall of Fame and Exhibition Center in Dayton, Ohio, of which I'm proud to be an official funk ambassador. Go to thefunkcenter.org to learn more and help keep the funk alive. Today, I'm pleased to welcome back to the Truth and Rhythm show saxophonist and drummer Daryl Dixon. He joined me a couple of months ago to discuss his impressive body of work that includes recording and playing with Parliament and P-Funk spin-offs Quazar and Mutiny, classic Sugarhill Records, a long list of studio credits, and more than 30 years ago forming the musical entity known as Chops Horns. It is primarily for the latter that I have asked him to come back and bring his longtime partner in horniness, fellow sax and woodwinds player David Watson.
Yes, yeah.
The two of them have provided their musical services to back an astounding array of well-known artists on stage and television and in the studio, including Alicia Keys, Mariah Carey, Christina Aguilera, Stevie Wonder, the OJs, Rolling Stones, Bob Dylan, and the Police. Daryl and Steve, so glad to have you. How's it going?
It's going good. It's nice to be back on your show.
Either way, it's all good. So for our viewers at home, identify yourself. I'm not sure how you're going to end up, whether left or right on the final video. So Dave is with the sunglasses.
That's me.
And Daryl's without, so that's the easy way to do it. Now, where are you coming to us from today?
From my house in Rahway, New Jersey. Dave hails from Bayonne, New Jersey, which is about 20 minutes north of here.
Without traffic, which I hit plenty today, but it's good to be here, and we're real happy to be able to talk about the funk legacy.
Outstanding. Glad to have you guys. So last time, we talked extensively with Daryl. So for starters, I want to get to know you a little bit better, Dave, and for our viewers to get to know you better. So where are you from originally, and how did you first get into music?
Well, I'm originally from Jersey City, New Jersey. I moved to Bayonne when I was a little guy. My father was a saxophonist, known as Doc Watson. And he played tenor in a lot of the local area situations, worked a lot in Newark, New Jersey, and the Cleftones and groups like that. So I grew up to seeing him come off the road and stand in the corner, facing the corner, practicing. And one of my highlights was when he would put his horn away before he closed the case. He let me kind of touch the keys. So from a young age, I heard saxophone, and that's kind of what intrigued me. And when I got old enough to play, my grammar school music teacher had a summer program where they were giving away free instruments for the summer for people in the community. And my friends all said, let's form a band. So I picked the saxophone, and they picked all the other instruments. And by the end of the summer, they were bringing their instruments back, and I kept mine. And I've been playing saxophone ever since. And I think that might have been the 4th grade.
And you began with tenor or alto, or?
I began with alto. I was accustomed to hearing tenor at my house, but I started playing alto. And when I got to high school, that's when I started messing around with the tenor. And I also had a love for the flute. Now, it did have a little to do with there were two gorgeous Polish girls, sisters, that both played flute. And as you know, in a band situation, you sit in a U. So I was on one side of the U, they were on the other, so I could kind of see them from my side of the U, and I wanted to get on their side of the bandstand. So the only way I could do that was to play flute. So my band director started giving me some flute lessons. But what I didn't really realize at the time was that I had an aptitude for flute, and it soon became one of my favorite instruments. And my father, before he passed, he told me that that was my main instrument. I was a flute player trying to be a sax guy.
And so those early bands that you got into outside of school, what types of things were you playing?
Well, this was in the 70s, so live bands were in all of the bars, and I was lucky enough to have a buddy of mine whose father owned a bar, and because I was only 16, they would still let me go in the back and practice and play the music. And one of the first bands, if I recall, was called Devilish Funk. And we play all the local pubs in Bayonne, Jersey City, Elizabeth, Hoboken. And I was this, 16-year-old kid playing with all these 22 and 23-year-olds and just doing basically top 40 music of the time, Kool and the Gang, Earth, Wind and Fire, Ohio Players. We learned all these tunes off the record. So I started learning how to use my ear before I learned how to read.
And so were you mostly playing, the main horn parts, or were you, venturing off and doing any soloing at that point?
Well, I was doing a little bit of both. I was trying to kind of learn how to solo. And the nice thing was, my mentors were, Maceo, playing with James Brown, and Fred Wesley and Maceo, in my eyes, are the gods of funk, and Daryl and I just mere disciples.
Was there anyone besides Maceo and Fred that you kind of looked to saxophone-wise?
Well, I have to say Grover Washington Jr., Mr. Magic. Mr. Magic really helped me find out what magic really was when it came to girls, because of Mr. Magic. Playing that song, the ladies, oh, that cute boy, let's let him play that horn. Oh, so yes, Mr. Magic and Grover Washington. He was the first saxophonist, believe it or not, that I copied. I listened to Maceo and I loved what he did, but Grover was my first, and then came Maceo as far as copying his solos. But there was something about the funk. Maceo and Grover were totally two different players, but Maceo had this swing and articulation thing that really, they call it funk, but it's soul music because it gets into your soul. So I hope that answers you.
Oh yeah, just the way Maceo and Fred would weave in and around the beat and the rhythm.
Yeah.
So cool.
Yeah.
But love Grover too. And so while Daryl was, I think Daryl, you played some with Patrice Rushen, right? And then you got your break with Parliament through Fred Wesley. What was happening with Dave during that time?
Well, Daryl and I go back before that.
Okay, tell me when you guys connected.
We met in college, and I remember, quite vividly, in 1974, before I went to college, I went to one of the jazz performances at Jersey City State College. And at the time, there was a gentleman, Dick Lowenthal, running the band, and we had a going joke, Dick Lowenthal, before he dicked you. But he had a tendency of going around the state and pulling the best high school musicians he could find. Fortunately or unfortunately, most of them were Caucasian. So when I got to see the band, Daryl and the trombone player, Clarence, they were the only two brothers in the band, so they kind of stuck out.
Yeah, I always had it. Me and the other guys in the jazz band, we had a kind of a running joke where they would always ask me, "How does it feel to be the only black guy in the band?" And I said, And as far as I'm concerned, you guys are the only white guys in the band. So I feel fine. I'm comfortable.
So I heard them perform, and I hung around. I remember hanging around, and Darryl and Clarence, I met them, and then they had their horns in their hand, and they just started playing. And I'm listening to these two dudes, and I said, you know what? This is where I want to go to school. I don't care about, what else is going on here. I want to get under the wings of these two fellas, because they were really happening. So went to Jersey City State, auditioned for the jazz band, didn't get in because my reading wasn't good enough. But I did go to the school, and Darryl and I became friends. And did you tell him the story of how Chops was formed?
No.
You don't know? Okay, so there's a lot to talk about. Waiter, can I have a glass of water, please? So basically, I had made a connection with Savoy Records, and they were doing all gospel music. John Daniels, who's now passed, he was one of the producers working at Savoy Records. Darryl had a horn section together with a couple Philly cats, and they were doing, a bunch of session work down there. But Darryl was also playing and writing, I must add. He wrote 95% of the arrangements back then. He was writing and playing with us and writing and playing with the guys from Philly. So Darryl said, look, Dave, if you get rid of some of these college guys and add my trumpet and trombone player, they'll give you our work and you give them your work. And so we'll get more work and we'll be just one section. So I went to Philly for a session. Darryl wrote the arrangement. No articulations on the arrangement at all. He set it on the stand for the four of us, and we rehearsed it. We all articulated and phrased exactly the same. So we were all from the school of funk. So nobody had to tell anybody, oh, play this shorter, play that longer. Once that happened, we knew we had something special. And that was the beginning of Chops Horns, which was probably, 1976, 77.
It was 78, because in 77 I was still in P-Funk, but I had,
Okay.
I left. It was 78 actually. Yeah.
So were you guys doing that together while you were doing P-Funk, or did you take a break, or how did that?
No. It was after I left P-Funk.
Okay.
Because prior to that, I was working with the P-Funk with the horn set, P-Funk horn section. Chops hadn't been formed at that time. When it was after I left P-Funk that had started.
So you guys were friends, Dave. But what were you doing while he was doing the P-Funk tour thing?
I was working in the top 40 bands and going to college, trying to get my degree. And I had a horn section together of mostly college guys, and we were doing gospel recordings for Savoy Records. And that was the first, my introduction to the studio. But I think Darryl's got his timeline a little screwed up, because I remember him leaving college to go to LA.
Right.
So he was doing stuff in the gospel horn section and with his Philly guys before he left for P-Funk. Old age kind of gets there after a while. But no, the reason I remember is because I really admired Darryl's playing. And he was one of the first good players that I met that didn't have an attitude. I don't know what it was with the 70s and 80s, but all these great players, thought too much of themselves. And luckily, it's not like that now, but it was back then. These guys had chips on their shoulders. And if you weren't as good as them, they brushed you off. But Darryl wasn't like that. He was very nurturing. And I learned an awful lot from playing with him and listening to how he arranged. And to be honest, I stayed under his tutelage for a good 15 years before I started coming into my own. using what I learned from him and the stuff I had learned from Maceo and the guys, and developing my own style of arranging.
Did you get a chance, Dave, to see Daryl perform with P-Funk?
Unfortunately not. Nope, never did. Nope, I just saw videos because he had a younger brother, Steve, that I knew. And Steve was the one, he's the archive guy. He would keep all of the, and his mother would keep all of the newspaper articles, any kind of recordings, especially when he was going to Jersey City State. When I met his mom, she pulled out this book with all of his concerts from when he used to do James Brown in high school as a drum major, dancing like James Brown. He didn't tell you that part, did he? Yeah. Darryl and I go way back. We have a 30-plus relationship, and we've known each other through 2 marriages.
True brothers and horns.
Yeah, man.
So what about from a group standpoint, Dave, in the late 70s? Who were some of the bands that you mentioned Kool and the Gang, but were there any others besides that? I don't know, like a Tower of Power, whoever that you really admired group-wise with horns?
Any kind of horn band caught my ear. I'm not going to lie. Tower of Power did, and we call that Oakland funk, which is that's different than P-Funk.
Oh, yeah.
And I really admired Kool and the Gang because they had an original horn interpretation that wasn't Maceo, and it wasn't Tower of Power. You know what I mean?
And it wasn't Earth, Wind, and Fire. It wasn't Blood, Sweat, and Tears. Their horn concept was different than all of them.
So, but all of the bands you mentioned, Blood, Sweat, and Tears, there was a guy, Jim Rath, trumpet player I went to college with. He was a little older than me, and he had a band that had a huge horn section, and they did all of that stuff. They did Buddy Miles. They did. They didn't do the Earth, Wind, and Fire. They did what was what band did we just say? Blood, Sweat, and Tears. They did a lot of Blood, Sweat, and Tears, and Chicago. Yeah. And that was the first time I heard Chicago was with these guys doing some covers of Chicago. And I was like, man, who is that? Oh, Chicago. Then I went out and I got all the Chicago stuff. So I've been a horn section whore for a long time. I love them all, and I've listened to them all. And I think I've incorporated some of their style in my playing. Now, you asked about solo stuff. Was I a soloist? I might seem like an outgoing guy, but inside I was very nervous. And when I was young, I wore sunglasses on stage to hide from the audience. Okay? Now, I felt comfortable in a horn section because there were more people. I wasn't by myself, and the focus wasn't just on me. So what that did was it taught me how to become a section player. And I tell you, I met a bunch of great soloists. You put them in a section and they're not grooving. They stick out because they don't know how to play in a section. You put them out front by themselves and they're the best in the world. So I always kind of became a section guy. And I still am today. I finally decided just recently to start working in 2020 on a solo flute project that I wanted to dedicate to my dad. Because as you know, there aren't a lot of funk, R&B, smooth jazz flute players out there. There's a million sax players. But Scott, this is breaking first on your show. I've never said this publicly to anyone. I've talked down, my close friends, they know, but nobody in the media knows about me working on a flute album.
Yeah, when you talk about flute, I mean, the ones that come to mind are like Bobby Humphrey and Hubert Laws.
Yeah.
And then the guy from Brick.
Well, my guys were Dave Valentine and Nestor Torres. Those were the two guys. And you know, the guy in Jethro Tull's band. Come on, you can't go without him. But believe it or not, in college, flute was my connection to the classics, to be able to play classical music. Because I didn't really like the avant-garde, Debussy stuff that people wrote for that he wrote for saxophone. I didn't like classical saxophone. And I think one of the reasons was I couldn't get that fast classical vibrato. Daryl can do it, but I can't get that. I couldn't get that fast classical vibrato. So I laid in the funk, R&B, pop scene, and I dabble at jazz. But yeah.
All right. So Dave's talked some about you, Daryl. What were your first impressions of Dave?
It definitely wasn't one of those, go away, kid, you bother me situations. It definitely wasn't that, because it was in '74 that we met. Now in college, I really didn't have a whole lot of contact with Dave, and I mean, I don't know, maybe it was because I don't know if it was because I was older than him or what, but
that's why the upperclassmen didn't hang out with the lowerclassmen,
and I mean, in school, I didn't have a lot to say about Dave. I mean, and to tell you the truth, I didn't pay too much attention to Dave, not until we started working in the horn section. I mean, I didn't have any real impression of Dave because I really didn't get a chance to really hear him play. I mean, our classes were kind of different, and so in school I didn't really have an impression of him. Not until we started working together. Really.
I just remembered the first words Daryl spoke about me was I went to the jazz band audition, and the band's there, and they throw this sight reading music in front of you, and I fell over it like you were kicking your grandmother down the stairs. Oh man, I was terrible. But then when it came to the soloing part, I did better than the other guys that were great readers. So Dick was about to dick me, and Daryl said, "Hey, give that guy there another chance." He said, "Give him another chance at the charts." That was the first words that he kind of ever really spoke to me outside of the time I met him. And they did give me another chance, and I did the same thing. I fell over the charts, but I was a better soloist. But Dick Lowenthal's thing was reading.
Yeah. And to tell you the truth, I don't remember that, and so it might be an old age.
No,
I'm glad he does that because I don't remember. I don't know.
Well, it clearly left an impression on him. So.
Yeah. I mean, nobody in the room really. They're all sitting there cold, and we got these four guys up auditioning. It was a terrifying experience just going in there.
Yeah. Well, plus we all knew what Lowenthal's deal was as far as the jazz band. He had, like the fix was in. Let's put it like that. The fix was in because, Lowenthal at the time, he was very much into being looked on as a great educator. Because people in other colleges like Towson State and Towson State in Maryland, North Texas State in Texas, I mean, they all had like huge music departments, and the band directors of those jazz bands were looked on as really great educators, and Clem DeRosa, who was another like hot educator in this area, and he wanted to be in that clique. Now because of that, he wanted to make the band like comparable to those bands. Even though Jersey City State was a smaller college than these colleges, he wanted to make it comparable so that he could be looked on as like this really great great educator. As a result, people that were in the band, a lot of people didn't get a chance to really play and really, really experience the jazz band, like I did. And so, because Lowenthal was basically too much involved with getting his own thing off, than than the students. It was unfortunate, but that's the way it was.
But you know what? I'm the kind of guy, Scott, that when people tell me I can't do something, that motivates me. And that's just my personality. So not getting in that band as a freshman was the best thing that could have ever happened to me, because it sent me to the woodshed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, let's jump forward a couple years. Dave, did you also play on Quazar and or Mutiny?
I played on Mutiny, but not Quazar.
Okay.
No,
so tell
Quazar was before Mutiny.
Yeah. So what was the first project that you guys, you said there's some gospel stuff, but was Mutiny the first funk that you guys worked on together, or?
I think so.
It could have been. We homed our studio sound at Sugarhill Records, and between 79 and 80, early 81, because we were the in-house horn section. But there was a gentleman by the name of Jigs Chase, organist. He did most of the arranging. But that's how we homed our studio sound. So now that once we homed that sound, now we took what we had with Daryl's arrangements, and we could work for other people. And Mutiny, I guess you would say, was one of the true guys, because they were funkin' on a one and loyal to none.
Yeah.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, those first two records they did were pretty great. When did Chop's Horns officially become an entity, and how did you come up with that name?
Well, as far as coming up with the name, I mean, I came up with it, but I don't know how it came up with it. I mean, we were messing around. Me and Marvin, the original trumpet player, we were bantering names back and forth, and I came up with Chops mainly because there was a horn section called Lips that Chick Corea used a lot, and I had and they put out an album, and I had one of their albums, and so I thought of this because I was really into Chick Corea and all that stuff, and so I thought of this horn section called Lips, and so I said, I mean, obviously you couldn't take Lips, so the next best thing to Lips was Chops, so that's how I thought of the name Chops was from that, So.
Now, once he brought that name to the four of us and said, Chops, I looked at Chops a totally different way, because the word chops is used with many musicians to say, man, this dude's got chops, which meant he could play really good, especially guitar players. Man, this dude's got chops. So I looked at it as, if we take the name Chops, it's telling people we can play. So, what's in the name? A lot's in the name. We were out with Alicia, and I ran into Phil Collins. And I introduced myself, and I said, hey, Chops Horns. He said, oh, Chops. He said, you guys must be good, And, I was kind of humble. No. I said, nah, man, if you got that name Chops, you better own it. That's who you are. You better own it. So when Daryl did come up with the name, that's how I saw Chops. And we went to Milton Bingham, believe it or not, who was another producer at Sugarhill Records. We told him our thoughts and asked him if he could find somebody that could come up with a logo. And he found a guy. And the guy gave us the logo, and we bought the logo, and we've used it ever since. About 6 years later, the guy saw the logo somewhere. He said, man, if I would have known how much these guys are going to use my logo, I would have charged them more. I have that logo as a tattoo on my arm today.
What year about was it that you came up with the name, and
Well, let's see. Quazar. Let's see. now Glenn Goins died in '78, right? Right after, soon after we finished the Quazar album. And so it was like it had to be somewhere between '78 and '79, because I remember, I mean, I remember it well because of Glenn's death, but it had to be right about then, right about '78, '79.
And do you remember what your very first record credit was as Chops Horns?
Wow.
That's a good question. Sylvia Robinson and Joe Robinson from Sugarhill would not give us any credits. They wanted us to be called the Sugarhill horn section. We didn't go for it because we had already had our Chops thing. They also wanted to sign us, and that's a whole nother story for another time. But the first...
Wow, the first horn credit for Chops.
It would have to be on one of the Savoy Gospel albums.
Yeah.
Yeah, it would have to be one of the Savoy Gospel albums. The most memorable for me was on the Rolling Stones album.
Wow.
To see horns by Chops.
Yeah. And which record is that?
That's the first one was Undercover of the Night. That was that album.
And I think it's an album that has a woman on it that has these peel off stickers on her.
It's the same album that has Start Me Up on it.
No, Start Me Up was on Tattoo You.
No. Yeah, you're right. No. Too Much Blood.
That record, I think, also had the one you're talking about, Undercover. I think also had Harlem Shuffle on it, maybe. But,
Harlem Shuffle. Yep, he's right. You're right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Now, there was a song that we did that Mick told us to go for it, and they never put it on the record because they cut 28 songs and they only put out 8. So somewhere in the can is this tune with flying chops all over it that they didn't release, and you might remember the name.
Yeah, the name of the song was called "Strictly Memphis," and it was kind of an homage to the whole Memphis soul sound, which Rolling Stones and all those British bands. I mean, they loved the whole blues and they loved that. And it was a song called "Strictly Memphis," and if I do say so myself, I wrote a really killing arrangement. I really wish that I had that song. But it was called "Strictly Memphis." I remember it vividly, and it'll never see the light of day.
Well, we don't know that.
You never know, but
if they, for that one particular record, they cut 28 songs. So let's just say the Rolling Stones cut 20 songs per album, and they only released 8 to 10. They've got to have 100 songs in the can or more. That their family will have. Later in life. I'm just hope I'm alive to hear some of it.
Yeah, and also the song that we did for Undercover Tonight called "Too Much Blood," they did a video of that song, and it's like to see the video on TV playing the stuff that we they had some other horn section. It was. And I think wasn't it like shadows kind of?
They didn't even show the horn guys.
Yeah.
They showed shadows of horn players. Like you couldn't see who they were. They showed shadows when the horn parts came up. It would have been kind of nice for them to call us.
Yeah, right. It would have been nice
to do it.
Right.
To get the exposure. We've had that problem, Scott, throughout our career where we've been very close to stardom and it's slipped through our fingers. Now, me being a spiritual guy, but not a religious guy, everything happens for a reason. So I'm not going to complain that Teddy Pendergrass got in his accident when we were scheduled 2 weeks to go in to do his album. We had the date in our book, and we were like, once we do Teddy Pendergrass, he's going to take us on tour, and people are going to know who we were. People didn't really know us on the Police tour, because we were just some brown dudes from Jersey. We didn't get a chance. Sugarhill Gang kept us in the dark. They didn't want people to know who we were. So, you know, we flew under the radar, and that seems to be our forte, is working.
Well, it was also at a time, and we talked a little bit about this last time, Daryl. It was at a time when horns in general were kind of getting swept into the rug. You know, when you get into the early 80s, when the synthesizers were in a large extent replacing horns in a lot of popular music, and it was also becoming a thing with record companies where they, you know, if they could avoid paying horn players, they were going to do it, you know.
Right.
So cutting them out of the touring groups, and yeah, I mean, horn players just were forced to take a back seat in a lot of ways, I think, you know, just at the time when you guys were really getting started as the Chops Horns.
Yeah, but you know, the Police tour turned a lot of heads, like Billy Joel and people that came to the show and saw the Police with horns. A lot of people started scratching their head like, hey, maybe horns are coming back.
Like rock kind of started embracing horns more than the R&B. The R&B groups been away from it.
Yeah,
right.
we like to think that we were the catalyst for Phil Collins. For Phil Collins getting horn, you know, with the Sue Studio and the other stuff, the other horn stuff. As far as Phil Collins using horns, and we like to think that we kind of started that because he came to one of the Police concerts.
A lot of those guys did.
Yeah.
David Bowie, a lot of the big rock and rollers came to see the Police.
Yeah, and I mean, was it a coincidence that Phil Collins started using horns after seeing the Police with us? I don't know.
Could be.
You know.
How did you guys get that Rolling Stone gig in particular?
Well, we were at the time we had a lawyer named Jeff Layton.
Yep, Jeff.
Yeah, and he was our lawyer at the time. He knew the lawyer, the Rolling Stones lawyer. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think this is how it went. The Rolling Stones, okay, they were looking for horn players, and basically, to do their stuff, and basically it came down to, through Jeff Layton, it came down to either they were going to use us or they were going to use King Creole and the Coconuts horn section.
And
right,
the Uptown horns also. There were 3 or 4 horn sections being thrown around, and I do recall Jeff telling the story that he told their lawyer, "Look, you got the best rock and roll band in the world. You want the best horn section in the world," and that's how we got the gig. Because Jeff was a cocky dude, man.
Yeah, he was. Yeah,
you know.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how it happened. Jeff bum rushed him.
Well, tell me about how you guys meshed together as an entity, as a group. You know, how did you get along personally? How did you get along musically? You know, both of you guys being sax players, how did you divvy up the parts?
You mean what, as far as arranging or playing, or you're?
Well,
or
both.
I think I know what you mean.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because of the fact that I play mostly tenor and bari, and Daryl was playing alto and a little soprano, through the years, it's very hard to find me on a recording with an alto, playing an alto solo. I just didn't play it because Daryl played alto. And that's kind of how we did. And it's hard to find Daryl on a tenor solo after Chops got together. I played tenor, he played alto, and
because just to add that, as far as tenor, like when I was with Patrice Rushen in LA, I played alto and tenor in her band. You know, that's the most tenor that I've ever played, was then. But then, you know, I mean, like Dave said, when we started working together, tenor, you know, Dave played tenor, and plus the fact that Dave was the first sax player that I had met that could play anything that I wrote, because I have a tendency sometimes to write difficult parts rhythmically, you know, because since I play drums also, I think that way. And Dave was the first sax player that I worked with that was able to, you know, play sax parts the same as me, the same as I can play, you know. So So at that point, it was like, well, hey, why should I play tenor? I ain't got no need to do that. And it was easy. As and frankly, it was easier. It was easier on me because you know, everybody has their instrument. I prefer alto. I mean, Maceo played tenor at first, you know, in Brown's band, and he switched to alto. But it's just a personal preference. I'm glad that there was somebody that could play, that was competent enough to play tenor. Yeah, you know, I didn't have to worry about it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I also love the baritone too. When we were touring with the Police and I was starting to make some money, that's when I bought my baritone, which I play today. And it's 1935, made in 1935. It's a Con. And on the stuff we did for Alicia Keys, that's the horn on her records.
Like if I ain't got you, you know, and you know, super, you know, all those tunes, yeah.
But getting along was, I mean, it's kind of almost like a singing group. You know what I mean? I mean, you become family, you know? I mean, I would go to family situations at Darryl's. I mean, with Marvin, the trumpet player, we'd stay at his house and do barbecues. And I knew his children, his wife, and Booney, you know, his wife after Booney passed. She came to my first marriage. She came up from Philly and brought me one of Booney's gold records from Sugarhill because I had a major fire in 1985 and I lost all my gold records. But so we managed to kind of stay friends and you know, with each other and with our families. And you know, as time went on, it kind of boiled down. Booney passed at a young age, and Marvin stopped playing trumpet. And so Daryl and I split up for a while. He was working for UPS, and I was a music teacher at a high school. And I'll never forget, Daryl came to my school in Harrison, New Jersey, was sitting in my car in the rain. And he said, Dave, this UPS thing's not working for me. My knees are starting to go carrying these packages. Man, I want to get back to playing full time. And I said, Daryl, you're singing to the choir, teaching these little kids. I'm ready to wring one of their necks. I'm ready to get back on the road and get to play full time again. And not long after that is when Daryl befriended one of his old friends, Bobby Douglas, who was working with Ray Chew and the crew. And Ray Chew invited Chops Horns to come to a Wednesday night thing that they do at the Apollo, an amateur night thing at the Apollo. And we went as a horn section. Now, he told us to do a Tower Power song, What Is Hip, and an Earth, Wind, and Fire song. I forget what the name of that one was. Yeah. And Daryl said, well, Ray, can we go to the key of A so we can play some original chop licks so you can hear what we do more so than playing other people's horn stuff? Because that was the one thing, that's why I'm still in chops today, Scott, is because that we have a sound and an interpretation that no other horn section has. You know, and there are 5 horn sections in the world that you can name that are like that. Once you hear them, you say, oh, I know who that is. And I think we're one of those. Okay, let's say maybe 7. We're one of those. We're in that top dirty dozen. Let's bring it to a dozen. So we get to the song. We're playing the Earth, Wind, and Fire song, and Daryl gives Ray the cue. They go to A. Now we play all this original chop stuff, and then we go back to the Earth, Wind, and Fire song. I knew we had Ray because at the end of the song, he looked around at the band and said, let's go back to A. He wanted to hear them horn parts again. And that was the beginning of a 17-year relationship with Ray Chew.
So what year was that then that you guys got back together again?
Ooh,
that
2000 or 1999.
It was a year before Alicia, so it was 2001.
2001.
Yeah, because he was the music.
Horn Odyssey.
What?
2001, A Horn Odyssey.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, well, because he was the musical director at the Apollo at that time, and the friend of mine, Bobby Douglas, I mean, we played together in high school and all, when we were both in high school, and then we lost touch for a while, and Bobby was out playing with Chaka Khan and a lot of other people, and I was in New York and happened to see him riding on the subway. So it said, Bobby, Daryl, hey, blah, 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 and that's, I found out he was working with Ray, and then, the rest is history.
Yeah, Ray knew everybody. He was playing behind everybody. He's the one that introduced us to Kathy Sledge, and we wound up doing some stuff for her because she was on the show with Ray. He introduced us to Alicia Keys. We got to play behind every major R&B act, thanks to Ray Chu and the shows that he would do. We were his in-house kind of horn section. So
and I think the main reason that he liked us was because mainly because when he's like, if he has a show that he's a musical director for, okay, there's a million things that he's got to do as a musical director. He's doing this, doing that, and all of that. And so we arranged the horns. So he knew all he had to do was give us a list of the songs that he was doing. And whether the songs had horns or not, he knew that the horn stuff was taken care of. And that's one less thing that he has to worry about. But that's the crux of any gig. If you're able to make whoever's hiring you to make their job easier, and you're able to do it competently, then you got the gig.
Well, Ray also enjoyed the fact, opposed to like a guy like Ricky Minor. Ricky Minor is another high energy MD, but he wants everything exactly like the record. He tells the percussionist, hey, that's not the clap patch that they used on that song. You got to find clap patch number 72. He was real stickler for that kind of stuff. Ray liked us coming up with original horn parts because it gave his band a sense of originality. Now, Ray also enjoyed cutting our horn parts. He enjoyed hearing all this extra stuff. Then he'd laugh. He'd say, man, you're stepping on the guitar part. No, you can't play that part. He said, let's save that for your record. And that became the going story. Let's save that for your record. So he would take out a good 40% of what we wrote. But in a lot of situations, it's best to have too much and not need it than not to have enough. So that was our relationship with Ray. And that has started to change now that he's doing Dancing with the Stars out in LA, because he's spending a lot of his time out there, which in a way is kind of good for us, because the last couple years, we've had to make other contacts and we've had to start developing our own material. And that's where we ran into Soul Joe Parisian in Canada and started Chops and Soul. We started a whole new funk project last year.
That was the collaboration that I was telling you before with Fred Wesley and Bernie Worrell and Dennis Chambers.
Guys, could you explain to listeners and viewers what in your mind makes for a compelling horns arrangement for funk, and maybe contrast that to a different style of music?
Now, I want to understand the question. You want to know the difference between arranging for funk and arranging for other types of music? Is that what you're asking?
Well, primarily, I want you to see if you can explain, when you're arranging for funk, mm-hmm. What are like some of the qualities that you're injecting into that?
Well, okay. If somebody gives me a track that they want me to write horns for, number one, you know, I don't think of horn parts when I'm listening to a track, and when I'm listening to it. I'm not thinking of horn parts at first. You know, I don't think of any horn parts until I'm actually at my computer with my arranging program. That's when I think of horn parts. I don't get into all of that because all it does is just clutter my mind up with stuff. You know, because I have I have a million licks in my head. If I had, you know, I got more licks than I got money. I wish I had a dollar for every lick that I got in my head. And it's just that the first thing I do is I listen to what the drums are doing, being a drummer. I listen to what the drums are doing. I listen to, you know, what the instruments are playing rhythmically, melodically, because a lot of times the best arrangements are the ones where I can use the horns to enhance stuff that's already there.
Already in the track. Some of the stuff the guitar player did, a piano player,
Right.
a bass riff.
Yeah. And it could be the smallest, minutest thing. You know, it could be something that's like one measure long, a lick. But what I can do is take that lick, that last one measure, and I can expand on that lick because of the licks that I have. I can expand on that. So that's what I do. I listen to what everybody's doing, and especially in funk. In funk, everything is so rhythmic, and so there's a lot to listen to, and there's a lot that you can get out of the track itself that makes it. It makes it easier. It makes it easier for me. I don't have to work it like thinking, well, what should I put here? What should I put there? You know, just listen to what's in the track. And like I said, it could be just 2 notes, 2 or 3 notes, like just a simple ba da 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 like that. Then I can take that ba da 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 and make it ba da da ba 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 da ba da ba ba da. It's like, and just expand on that.
Can the teacher and me talk a little bit?
Yeah, go ahead, bro.
To all of you music people out there. I spent a lot of years in the classroom, and I think this will really help. Every style of music has a language. Just like every language has an accent, different languages. You know, you speak Polish, yakshimash. You know, there's a certain way you pronounce. Spanish, same thing, French. It all has a vibe. And that's the same in music. There's a jazz language. There's a funk language.
And a unique cadence.
Yes, and there is a pop language, you know, and you have to kind of know what works. So if you're doing a funk groove, bam, you're not going to put in, did it, you know, because that's a bebop lick. You know what I mean? So I think that's something that Daryl does unconsciously. I don't think he thinks about it the way I just explained it. Yeah. But I do when I'm doing an arrangement. If I start to lean too much popish, if it's a funk tune, or if I'm doing a pop tune and I'm putting too much funk or jazz in it. But the universal rule is listen to that rhythm track. Because I'm telling you, in every style of music, you're going to find some stuff in that track that you can use if you're a horn arranger.
Well, you're right. He's right. And I'll just say that from my look, I mean, everybody's brought up differently in music. I started listening to Duke Ellington, Count Basie, Lionel Hampton, Gene Ammons, and these people before I even started listening to pop stuff. I started listening to that stuff when I was 8 years old, and so before I listened to pop stuff. Now, Duke Ellington is the one person that really inspired me to arrange horns, right? So now, that being said, I think that listening to Duke, the way he did contrapuntal movements and all of that stuff, helped me to incorporate the style that Chops has. I'll give you an example. Kool and the Gang, right? When Khalif Bayan, when he writes those horn parts, Kool and the Gang's horn parts are basically kind of linear, all right? The horns, all the horns are doing the same, basically same parts. There's harmony and stuff like that, right? But they're all doing the same parts. Chops, on the other hand, the difference between that horn section and ours, Chops, on the other hand, I'll take the four horns, and I'll have brass doing the trumpet and trombone player playing one lick, while contrapuntally the saxes are playing something else, and have it fit together. Kool and the Gang, as a rule, don't do that. But I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. But that's Khalif's style, you know. And so, you know, I mean, that's one of the things that differentiates people, you know, different styles of music. You know, not only me and Kool and the Gang style, but you know, all the other styles. But I think that listening to that stuff at an early age, at 8, helped me to develop, you know, a style, period. You know?
And to really hear what he's talking about, we just did last night a project for J.D. Blair, a funk project. And
yeah, just to let you know, J.D. Blair's a J.D. Blair's a drummer from Tennessee who worked with Shania Twain for about 7 years, you know, and he's a funkster really at heart, but he was the only black guy in Shania's band, and if you looked at videos of Shania Twain, you see, you know, he's got like the funny sunglasses and stuff, you know,
goggles he wears.
Yeah, right, yeah,
ski
exactly.
Goggles.
Yeah. I mean, he doesn't go full funk, you know, as far as the look, because he can't, you know, because of the gig that he's on, but his roots are in funk. But anyway, that's who he is. But go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to mention it because you mentioned that, you know, this is going to air in a couple months, and maybe his project might be out. So your listeners might want to keep an eye out for J.D. Blair, Blair. He's got some funk stuff that real funksters will love.
Yeah.
Cool. Let me ask you this. Is there a danger, or how do you avoid falling into possible cliches or sort of a corny part when you're trying to come up with an arrangement for the horns? You know, you want to keep it fresh, right? So how do you avoid falling into the trap of something that's kind of tired?
Goes back to our number one rule. Listen to the rhythm section. Yeah. Those guys on there, they're going to dictate where this song should go.
Yeah.
And like Daryl said, they'll play a little lick, and we'll take that lick and turn it into half of an arrangement just from one bar that we hear, or an interpretation of approach of how the guitar player is approaching the song, or how the drummer is approaching his breaks. And one of the things that I kind of think it's a cliche, but it always works, is a lot of times when you get an arrangement, the drummer will have specific hits that he does. So let's just go with da-da-da-da, right? And if you listen to the song, maybe this drummer does this 3 or 4 times. So what we do is we put horn parts to that. We'll play something exactly with the same rhythm that the drummer played. And when you hear the song, it sounds like the drummer's following us. But we're really following the drummer. And I think, you know, those kinds of things help keep everything original. Or should I say fresh?
Excellent. You know, when we're talking about these things, the hope is also that there's, you know, aspiring horn players that are also watching and listening, and they'll think about these things we're talking about and what they're doing. So now Chops, as you mentioned, has put out some of its own records. How many in total have you guys put out under that name?
Just two. Two.
Yep. So I think there was one in the early 2000s, and then one maybe 6 years ago or longer. Or...
Well, the very first one was on Atlantic Records, and it was a self-titled album, Chops. right? And it was us and basically the Sugarhill rhythm section, you know, and Dennis and with Dennis added also.
Right.
That was the first one. I mean, the other, and actually,
Wasn't that late 80s?
Yeah, that was 1984. That was
Yeah,
in
that was
1984.
Oh yeah, I see that now. That was quite a while ago. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. That was the first one. And then, well, then the other ones, well, there was Chops the Band, and that was Blowout.
Oh, I forgot about that.
That was the album called Blowout.
Sorry, Ambrosia.
Yeah.
Our female singer, she really made that album come to life.
Yeah, she did. And then, well, the only other one was the Chops and Soul. The
Chops and Soul project, which we started on last year or 2 years ago.
So I think I asked Daryl this last time, but from your perspective, Dave, what was the most unforgettable studio or stage memory being part of Chops?
Man, I have a lot of them. But one of them was we were in the studio in New York with Bob Dylan. And, you know, I couldn't believe that I was on my way to a Bob Dylan recording session to play for him. And he came to the studio with this big bottle of Jack Daniels and this heavy-set black woman.
Yeah, right. I remember that.
You know?
Yeah.
And I don't know if she could sing or whatever, but they were together. I didn't ask any questions. So Bob wanted a tenor solo. So he painted me a verbal picture. First I went in and played, and he said, "Nah, man, I want you to think of the Lower East Side on a Friday night when there's clouds in the sky and there's a little drizzle." I mean, he talked about cars on the block and people walking down, what they look like. I mean, the dude painted me this visual picture of what he wanted. So I tried to do that. I tried to play and think of the vibe that he was putting me on, and I came across something that he liked. So that for me was one of my most memorable. And two other quickies were the way the police treated us. They treated us like we were rock stars, like they were. And we were just three horn players from Jersey. I was 24 years old, and I can't tell you what that did for my self-esteem. You know, if these rock star millionaires can treat me with respect, then my friends on the corner, they better learn something, you know? So that, and also dealing with Alicia Keys. The fact that she was drop dead gorgeous. I mean, you look her in the eye and your heart would start to beat kind of hard. She was so beautiful, but not only was she beautiful physically, but she was also beautiful mentally and spiritually. She was such a sweetheart. And it really, you know, most of the pretty chicks I met were pain in the butt. You know, they were high maintenance. That's the word. Pretty chicks always high maintenance. Alicia wasn't. She was down to earth, educated, talented, and so those are the three things that kind of stick in my mind.
I mean, and she was she was what I would call nurturing. She was a very nurturing person. She felt very responsible for bands, for our well-being, you know. And I mean, and I tell you, the ones with the worst attitudes were the people that worked for her. She wasn't, but the people that worked for her felt that, you know, yeah, well, I work for Alicia Keys, so, you know, so step aside, you know. And it's a funny reversal, but I'm so glad that was the case, because we had to deal with Alicia on a daily basis. We didn't have to deal with those people that you know, with the people that worked around her. Not really, you know. And I mean, well, let's put it like, it's better that she was like she was than the way that the people around her were. So
And she's such a legitimate talent, you know, in an age when you have so many people that are production or studio products. Alicia's a real deal, I think.
Yeah, yeah, and it was really refreshing to to work with someone who knew, like when we did the Grammys, like we did the Grammys, and well, Ray Chu wrote the for her segment. Ray Chu wrote the violin, wrote the string part, and I remember at the rehearsal. Ray was talking to her about the string parts, and she actually knew what he was talking about. You know, a lot of her peers, you know, and artists her age, they would know what they would know what the hell he would be saying. I mean, and as a result, I think that, and because she was a musician, she had a closer bond with the people in her band, because, you know, a lot of these, you know, a lot of the divas, you know, they don't even rehearse with the band. They show up at the sound check and the gig, and that's it. You know, they have no real bond at all with, you know, with the band, with the people that they work with. You know, and it's, you know.
So we've experienced the good, the bad, and the ugly, and we're still sitting here able to talk about it, and we still have faith in music.
Well, it's good to know that you're able to understand Bob Dylan's, you know, he tends to mumble, right? So
Yeah.
It sounds almost a little bit like a Miles Davis kind of thing he was doing with you, though. Describing you know, a very specific situation, and
Yeah.
Mhm.
So what's next for you guys? How can people keep up with what you're doing and all that good stuff?
Well, we do have, you know, a website, you know, www.chopshorns.com. We also have a presence on Facebook, and I have an Instagram account, which is called Chops Horns, and that's kind of the best way, because, you know, I'm recently retired from teaching, so now I'm focusing on my music full time. And this is the first of many interviews I plan on doing in the next 2 years to show the direction that we're headed in. I'm trying to talk Daryl to come over to my house so that we can do some Instagram short little videos to start developing a little more media presence, you know, and that's kind of it. I'm working on the flute project, Chops and Soul. We're still working on material for another project. You never know who's going to call. We're in a position where we're available for touring again, which we hadn't been for a while. At least I wasn't. So a lot of opportunities. Let's just say we're open to a lot of opportunities. And on a personal note, I'm working on my clarinet and my bass clarinet. Because, you know, I want to kind of broaden the instruments that I play. You know, once Ray Chu got out in LA, all the sax guys out there played clarinet and bass clarinet. So when he came to do some stuff here back in New York, he's busting my chops about bass clarinet. So so I'm working on that right now. But I think the thing is that Daryl and I still have a love for music. We have a love for writing. We have a love for performing. And as long as we feel this way, we're going to keep in the mix.
Excellent. Well, I hope you guys get more work than you can handle, because if you do, that means there's some good funk being laid down for all of us to hear. So, you know, thanks for telling the stories, and, you know, great luck ahead. And I look forward to those new projects. So thank you guys.
Oh, you're welcome, Scott.
We'll definitely keep you informed.
Yeah, and don't forget about J.D. Blair. He's going to turn some heads.
Yep.
Excellent. Thank you, guys. Take good care.
You're welcome. Bye now.
Okay. Hey, back at Truth and Rhythm headquarters. Thank you for joining us on another magical ride with Truth and Rhythm. Whether you're watching or listening, as always, thank you so much for your continued interest and support. Be sure to subscribe. Go to YouTube, go to the Funk and Stuff channel. That's where Truth and Rhythm lives and breathes and thrives. Also, goodies here like TIR Quick Takes. And if you subscribe, you know what? You get the show before anyone else. It's free. If you love jazz, funk, R&B, soul, you can't miss it. Pass it along. Tell a friend. Tell family. This audience is growing, and it is a beautiful thing, all coming together for the love of this great music. Also, if you can throw us a buck or two, we could use the support financially, keeping the lights on, keeping the servers going, all these expenses. If you can help support the program, whatever you can give, much appreciated. Go to the funkandstuff.net website, and on the right-hand side of every page, you just click and you can donate through PayPal, credit card, whatever. Very easy to do and so much appreciated. And if you do a sizable donation, I will mention you on the program. Also, drop me a line. Email me at scottg@funkandstuff.net. Let me know who else you'd like to see on the show, what you enjoy about the music. Let's just kibitz and talk about stuff, talk music. You'll find that I respond very quickly, and I much enjoy the rapport and the camaraderie and the interaction. Always remember, this is your show, The True Music Lover. So for now, that's all the time we have for this one. It's a wrap. As always, Scott Dr. GX Goldfine saying, keep on vibrating to the rhythm of the one.